You know the feeling when someone says something so casually, so carelessly, that it settles in your chest like a stone. My daughter looked at me yesterday and said, "You're just waiting to die." Mom, she said it like she was brushing lint from her coat, not with malice, with irritation, the kind that comes from seeing me as an inconvenience. I didn't reply. At my age, you learn that silence can be the strongest answer, but her words, they didn't leave. They sank deep, and the echo lingered long after the sound of her heels faded down the hall. The apartment was too quiet after she left, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the walls are holding their breath. Grief has lived with me so long it knows its place sitting one chair over, not touching, but never really gone. I looked out the window. The morning light was thin, like weak tea. The old apple tree in the courtyard had shed most of its leaves. I watched them drift in slow circles. Everything falls in time, but not everything disappears. Some things settle, take root, grow again when you least expect it. My joints protested as I stood, but pain is an old companion now. I moved slowly, straightening the tablecloth she'd tugged when she pushed her plate away. She'd barely eaten. She never does when she comes here to check on me, which usually means instructing me. Sell this, move there, stop cluttering her tidy, efficient life. And every time I swallow my words, I look at her and still see the baby I carried home in a soft yellow blanket. I wonder if she ever sees me, the woman who worked a shift so she could have new books, who skipped meals so her plate could be full. Apparently, she remembers a different person entirely. I walked down the narrow hallway, my fingers tracing the faded pattern. This building used to smell of lemon polish and hope. Now it smells of old carpets and the quiet exhaustion of families living too close together. My Samuel, bless him, always said, "People don't grow distant, Ellie. They just stop looking in the same direction." Maybe that's why my daughter and I are now strangers sharing a past. When she looks at me, she sees a burden, a clock ticking down, something to be managed, stored, and eventually dealt with. Have you ever felt yourself becoming a task on someone else's to-do list? In the living room, I paused by the mantel. Photographs stood like quiet, stubborn witnesses to another time. My girl at 10, holding a science fair ribbon. At 16, in her graduation gown. At 22, master's degree in hand. In every picture, she's beaming. And in every one, I'm standing just at the edge of the frame, watching her shine. There aren't many recent photos of us together. She always said she didn't like how the camera made me look so old, a silly reason, but it cut deeper than she could know. My hand trembled only slightly as I picked up Samuel's photograph. He would have known what to say today. He always did. "Don't let the world make you small, Ellie," he'd whisper. "You're an oak tree, not a willow." I laced the frame back carefully. I didn't feel like an oak. I felt hollow, worn thin by decades of gentle patience. I returned to the window. Down in the courtyard, a young couple was arguing by the mailboxes. Their voices rose and fell like summer wind. It was a reminder life moves on, with or without your permission. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a small, persistent reminder that time wasn't finished with me yet. I took a slow breath. The air tasted different this morning, sharper, clearer, as if the world had shifted just a little under my feet. And maybe it had, because beneath the heavy stone of my daughter's words, something else was stirring, something quiet, ancient, and strong as iron. It wasn't anger, it wasn't revenge. It was a simple, steady truth rising to the surface after years of silence. I was not done, and I was not dying for anyone's convenience. The building around me, these walls, these creaking floors held more of my life than my daughter could ever guess. And tomorrow, when she returned, expecting my usual quiet surrender, she was in for the surprise of her life. Morning arrived colder than usual, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones before you even open your eyes. I dressed slowly, layer by layer, pulling on my thick, cable-knit cardigan, the one Melissa said made me look like a librarian from a black and white movie, as if being classic was a flaw. I buttoned it up to the top. At 76, comfort matters far more than fashion opinions. I stepped into the hallway and turned the key in my lock. The metallic click echoed sharply down the long, dim corridor. The building was already waking a symphony of rushed footsteps, muffled voices, the smell of slightly burnt toast drifting from a cracked door downstream. This place has always felt like a living thing to me, breathing, sighing, complaining. I know every one of its sounds. On the ground floor, the ancient elevator groaned open. Inside stood Mr. Peterson from 3B, a widower who always wore his hat indoors. His thin coat was pulled tight against the draft. "Morning, Eleanor," he said with a polite tip of his hat. "Morning, Arthur," I replied, stepping in beside him. He fidgeted with a crumpled envelope in his hands. "Got the notice yesterday, rent's going up again." He let out a dry chuckle. "Feels like this old place is squeezing the life right out of us." I kept my eyes on the brass elevator doors. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Doesn't matter much, I suppose," he sighed. "Whoever owns this building is just bleeding us dry." Then, softer, he added, "Wish they'd spare a thought for the folks who've called it home for 30 years. The elevator chimed for his floor, and he shuffled out. I didn't correct him. I never did. Outside, the wind cut right through my sleeves, but the crisp air woke something up inside me, a clarity, a purpose. My first stop was the pharmacy, 2 blocks away. The young man behind the counter didn't look up from his screen as I approached. "Name? Eleanor Vance," he typed, chewing his gum loudly. "Insurance denied the refill again. You'll have to call them." I simply nodded. It was always like this, 100 small inconveniences that piled up until you felt irrelevant. I had the money to pay, but Melissa had insisted on managing my finances after I'd once mislaid a bill. She said I was too trusting with numbers. When did helping become controlling? When did care become a ledger? The irony almost made me smile. Trust was never the issue between us. What she did with that trust, that was another story. Back on the sidewalk, the city felt busier, louder. People flowed around me as if old age were contagious. I didn't hurry. I let them pass, their urgency trailing behind them like exhaust fumes. My next stop was the post office. A long, slow line snaked toward the counter. I took my place at the end, feeling the weight of my years only because everyone else seemed to look right through them. A young mother was ahead of me, juggling a stroller, packages, and a little boy tugging on her sleeve. His toy car, a little red truck, slipped from his grip and rolled to a stop by my feet. I bent slowly, picked it up, and handed it to him. His smile was instant, warm and bright as a dandelion. "Thank you, lady." "You're very welcome," I said. His mother flashed me a grateful, tired smile. For a moment, the hard edges of the world softened, but outside, heading home, the feeling faded. A group of teenagers rushed past, laughing, shoving. One bumped my shoulder hard and didn't even glance back. I caught myself on a lamppost. It wasn't malice, it was that I was invisible. Back at the building entrance, I paused. Our property manager, David Clark, was by the mailboxes with a clipboard. He looked up, startled. "Oh, Mrs. Vance, didn't see you there." Of course he hadn't. "Morning, David." He flipped a page quickly, "Just preparing next month's notices. Another increase, I'm afraid." He gave an awkward laugh. "Not my call, of course. The owner signs off on everything." I nodded. "I see." He cleared his throat, lowering his voice. "If you or your daughter ever need to discuss payment plans, let me know. We try to be understanding." Understanding, a word so often used on people considered fragile, helpless, disposable. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, though I knew I wouldn't need to. I walked past him, my hand on the familiar, worn banister. This building wasn't just where I lived. It was where I had loved, where I had grieved, where I listened to my daughter speak to me as if I were already a memory. I climbed the stairs slowly, not from weakness, but because I was thinking, planning. People believed I was just waiting for the end. They had no idea what I'd been preparing for. Melissa arrived that evening without calling. It was a habit she'd formed over the last few years, walking into my home as if it were an extension of her own, a room she owned. I heard the sharp click-clack of her heels on the hallway linoleum long before her hand tried the doorknob. Finding it locked, she knocked, 3 sharp, impatient raps. "Mom, open up, we need to talk." Her voice had that clipped, strained tone she used with telemarketers and slow cashiers, the tone that said, "I'm already annoyed, and you're about to make it worse." I didn't hurry. At my age, I move at the only pace that doesn't protest. When I finally opened the door, she brushed past me without waiting for an invitation. Her coat was sleek and expensive. Her perfume was sharper than usual, a scent she always wore heavier when she was trying to mask something. "Why is it so dark in here?" she demanded, flicking on the overhead light without asking. "It isn't dark," I said, closing the door gently. "The sun just set." "What's the matter, Melissa?" She turned, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her eyes were bright, but not with tears, with agitation. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday." She called it a conversation, as if it had been a two-way exchange, "and you can't keep living like this." I waited. "In this old apartment," she continued, gesturing around, "your health isn't what it was, you forget things. I can't be running over here every time you have a little crisis." I studied her face, the irritation, the self-importance, the absolute certainty that she was heroically bearing the weight of my existence. "I don't recall asking you to run anywhere," I said quietly. "That's not the point." Her voice spiked. "Mom, you need supervision. You need to be somewhere with trained staff, a place where they can look after you." The words hung in the air between us. She didn't say nursing home. She didn't have to. I moved to my armchair and lowered myself into it. The worn fabric sighed beneath me. "Time for what, Melissa?" I asked. "Time for you to stop being inconvenienced by your mother?" She rolled her eyes, the same dramatic gesture she'd perfected at 14. "You always twist everything. I'm trying to help you. You said yesterday I was waiting to die." I let the statement sit between us like a physical object, heavy, unpleasant, neither of us wanting to pick it up. She blinked, startled, not from guilt, but from shock that I dared to repeat her own words back to her. Why do the hardest truths sound so shocking when given voice? "I was upset," she said quickly, waving a hand. "You take everything so personally. You know I didn't mean it literally." "But you meant it," I said. The silence that followed was thin, brittle. Melissa exhaled sharply, a puff of impatience. "Look, this isn't about yesterday. It's about the future. I talked to a place, Cedar Grove. They have a lovely room opening next month. It's clean, modern. They handle all the paperwork if the family helps with the financial guarantee." I looked at her, really looked at her. My daughter, middle-aged, tired beneath her polish, angry at a life that hadn't handed her the admiration she felt she deserved. She stood there, waiting for me to collapse into agreement, to offer my usual reluctant nod. She expected resistance, maybe even tears. She did not expect what came next. "No," I said. The word was simple, clear, a pebble dropped in a still pond. Her eyebrows shot up. "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not going anywhere. You can't stay here." "Why not?" "Because," she spluttered, gesturing wildly, "this building isn't safe. The rent is too high. You're alone all day. Your medications." "My medications," I said, cutting her off gently, "are my concern. And this building is safer than you think." She stared at me, a mixture of disbelief and pure annoyance twisting her features. She couldn't comprehend that I was speaking to her as an equal, or worse, as someone who had the right to her own decisions. "Mom, you're being irrational." "No," I said softly, folding my hands in my lap. "For the first time in a long, long while, I am being perfectly clear." Melissa's jaw tightened. "So you refuse my help again?" "I refuse," I said, "to be moved like a piece of furniture you've grown tired of." She looked around my apartment, her lips pressed into a bloodless line, the tidy shelves, the photos, the life I'd built here. "Fine," she spat, Do whatever you want, but don't call me when something goes wrong. I can't keep cleaning up after you." There it was, the truth sharp and unveiled. Not concern, not love, resentment. She snatched up her expensive purse, ready to sweep out in a dramatic exit, but with her hand on the doorknob, she turned. "You can't live alone forever, Mom. Eventually, someone else will have to make decisions for you." I met her eyes, calm, steady, unblinking. "We'll see about that," I said. She left without another word. Her angry heels stabbed the hallway floor until the sound dissolved into the building's usual quiet. I closed the door. Her words had stung, but they didn't cut deep anymore. They couldn't. Something inside me had shifted, slowly, unmistakably. The years of swallowing pain, of keeping peace at the cost of my own voice, they were ending. And Melissa hadn't even noticed, but she would, soon enough. The next morning, I woke with a dull ache behind my eyes, the kind that comes from thinking too much, not from sleeping too little. Melissa's visit had unsettled me, but not in the usual way. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't folding inward. I wasn't rearranging my thoughts to avoid upsetting her further. No, something else had settled in my chest overnight, something firmer, like a stone that had finally found its rightful place in the stream bed. I made a small breakfast, oatmeal with a sprinkle of cinnamon, a sliced apple, tea in my favorite chipped mug. The quiet of the apartment felt different today, not empty, intentional, full of purpose. At 9:30, I put on my navy wool coat, the one Samuel bought me for our 30th anniversary, and stepped into the hallway. My pace was unhurried, but every movement felt deliberate. I wasn't going to the pharmacy or the post office today. I was going to the bank. The branch was 3 blocks away, a polished glass rectangle that always seemed to gleam, even under a gray sky. Inside, warm, recycled air wrapped around me, carrying the scent of ink and lemon cleaner. A young teller noticed me and offered a polite, vacant smile. I nodded but walked past her, straight toward the office at the end of the hallway. Mr. Walsh had been there for decades, a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a memory for details most people forgot, like how I took my tea with 2 sugars, and how Samuel would always adjust his tie 3 times before sitting down. I knocked lightly on the open door. "Come in," he called. He looked up from his computer, and surprise flickered across his face before melting into genuine warmth. "Eleanor Vance, what a pleasure. Please, sit down." I lowered myself into the leather chair across from him. "Good morning, Alistair." "It's been a while," he said, his voice soft with concern. "Is everything all right?" I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the smooth fabric of my coat. "I'd like to review the documents for the Vance Family Trust, please." His expression shifted, just slightly, a professional mask settling into place, but his eyes remained kind. Most clients never touched their trusts after setting them up, especially not ones my age. "Of course," he said gently, "just give me a moment." He typed carefully, retrieving digital files. Then he opened a deep drawer in his desk and pulled out a thick, cream-colored folder. He placed it on the desk between us with a respect usually reserved for sacred texts. "Here it is, established 28 years ago, amended once after Samuel passed." He paused. "What would you like to look at?" "All of it," I said simply. He nodded, adjusting his reading glasses. "Take your time. When was the last time you reviewed the architecture of your own life, the plans you made when the world looked different?" I opened the folder. The papers were crisp, the ink still dark, my own signature looped steadily on every page. Next to Samuel's strong, sloping hand, I traced a finger along the top sheet, feeling the slight texture of the paper. This trust had been Samuel's idea, a way to secure our life's work, to shield it from storms, and to ensure I would always have a harbor. We'd put everything into it, our savings, our modest investments, and eventually, the deed to the building. Back then, the building wasn't worth much. It was old, drafty, in need of love, but Samuel had believed in its bones. "This place will shelter generations," he'd said, squeezing my hand. He'd been right. I turned the page, scanning the clauses. The ownership was clear, the trustee's name even clearer. Eleanor Marie Vance, sole trustee, sole beneficiary. Everything was still intact, untouched. Melissa had never bothered to ask. She assumed everything I had was ordinary, depleted, or automatically destined for her. She'd forgotten or never realized that sometimes the quietest women keep the biggest things silent. "Are you considering any updates?" Mr. Walsh asked after a few minutes of respectful silence. I looked up. "Not today, I just wanted to remind myself." He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "You're in an excellent position, Eleanor. More secure than most people in that building of yours." That made the corners of my mouth twitch, a small, private smile. "Yes," I said, "I suppose I am." I closed the folder and pushed it gently back toward him. "Thank you, Alistair." "My pleasure." He hesitated, his voice dropping to a more personal tone. "Eleanor, if you ever need assistance with any family matters, you know you can come to me." "I know," I said, and I did know. But this time, I hadn't come because I felt lost. When I stepped back onto the sidewalk, sunlight broke through the clouds, washing the pavement in pale winter gold. I breathed in slowly, deeply. The air felt lighter, as if a door had opened inside me, letting in a long-awaited draft. For decades, I'd been told what I needed, what I couldn't handle, what was best for me. But the truth sat quietly now in my knowledge, in the trust documents that held every right, every decision, every inch of control Melissa believed she had over me. She saw an old woman clinging to an outdated apartment. She didn't see the owner of the building, not yet, but soon enough, she would. Melissa didn't wait long before appearing at my door again. The sun was just beginning to set, staining the hallway windows a deep, murky orange. When I heard her knock, 3 fast, impatient taps, not a request, a summons. I opened the door slowly. She didn't even offer a greeting. "Mom, we need to settle something," she said, brushing past me as if I were a draft of cold air. Her heels were loud on the hardwood, stopping beside the small table where I kept my mail in a neat, orderly stack. She glanced at it, then around the room, her lips tightening. She never liked how tidy I kept things, said it made her feel judged for her own clutter. "What is it this time?" I asked, my voice soft. She inhaled sharply, as if bracing for a fight she'd already decided she'd win. "The building manager sent out notices today. Rent is going up again, a significant increase. You can't possibly afford it." I watched her closely. There was a jittery energy beneath her irritation, something that felt less like concern and more like strategy. "I've managed before," I replied, staying by the door. "That's because I've helped before," she snapped, turning to face me. "But I can't keep doing this, Mom. I have my own expenses." Her own expenses. I thought of the luxury car leases, the constant home renovations, the spa weekends, the life she'd built that always seemed to require just a little more money. "Of course," I said simply. "You're living in a building that's too expensive, too old, too big." She paced, her words heating the air. "Whoever owns this place doesn't care about people like you. They just want their money." I let her talk. She preferred monologues to conversations. It was easier when she controlled the script. She spun toward me, her conclusion ready. "I think it's time you considered selling off whatever's left in your accounts and letting me handle things. I could manage the paperwork, arrange a move, but you need to release some of this control you think you still have." The phrasing struck me. Whatever's left, control you think you still have. Not once did she ask what I wanted. I walked to the kitchenette and turned on the kettle, leaning lightly against the counter. "So, you're asking for money?" "No," she said too quickly. "I'm asking to help you manage your finances responsibly." "And the difference between the two?" She blinked, thrown off. "Mom, don't start with your..." I held up a hand, quieting her. "Melissa, tell me plainly, what do you want? How often do we disguise our own desires as concern for others?" She faltered, the mask slipped for just a second. "I want you to stop pretending everything's fine," she said, her voice cracking. I want you to stop acting like you're capable of handling things alone. You're 76, you forget appointments, you misplace bills, you get confused. I met her eyes then, really met them. No, Melissa, I said, my voice even. I don't get confused. I just stopped correcting you. She froze, the kettle clicked off behind me. I didn't rush to pour the water. I let the silence expand, fill the room, settle into the spaces she never allowed quiet to exist. Do you think I don't notice? I continued quietly. The things you hint at, the repairs you can't afford that always coincide with you wanting something new, the emergencies that appear at just the right moment? That's not fair, she muttered, looking away. It's accurate, I corrected gently. She swallowed hard, her composure slipping. Mom, I'm trying. I am, but it's hard, and this rent increase is not your concern. Her head jerked up, shock flashed across her face. She was so used to speaking over me that hearing a boundary must have sounded like a foreign language. Not my concern, she repeated, her voice rising. That's right. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Unbelievable. So what? You'll just pay it out of thin air, and when you run out, she stepped closer, when you can't afford your medication or groceries because you're too proud to let your daughter help you. I looked at her, feeling something inside me settle for good, like dust in a sunbeam, finally still. I'm not too proud, I said. I'm too aware. Aware of what? Aware that help from you always comes with a cost. She clenched her jaw, a muscle twitching. I can't believe you think so little of me. No, I murmured, the truth soft but heavy. I've thought too much of you for far too long. Her face flushed, whether from anger or shame. I couldn't tell, maybe she couldn't either. She grabbed her purse abruptly. Fine, if you want to live in denial, be my guest. Just don't expect me to fix things when it all collapses. I walked to the door and opened it for her. Good night, Melissa. She stormed out, her heels stabbing the floor with every step. The sound echoed long after she disappeared down the hallway. When the silence finally settled, I poured my tea. My hands were steady. I wasn't shaken by her anger anymore, because now I knew exactly where I stood. And soon, she would know exactly where she stood too. I didn't sleep much that night, but not because of worry. My mind was too clear, too awake, as if all the noise that had filled it for the past decade had finally quieted, allowing me to hear my own thoughts again. It was a strange feeling for a woman who'd spent years buried under other people's needs. By morning, the decision that had been circling inside me settled into place, solid and calm. I dressed with care in a soft beige sweater and dark slacks. I brushed my hair the way Samuel used to like parted on the left. Then I left the apartment with a steady, even step. Today was not for errands, not for Melissa, not even for myself, really. Today was for setting things straight. The law office sat on a quiet corner 2 blocks from the river, a small, dignified building with dark wooden doors and brass handles worn shiny by time. I'd walked past it countless times but hadn't entered in years. The last time was to finalize the trust after Samuel's passing. That day, the walls felt too high, the air too thick with loss. Today, everything felt appropriately sized. Inside, the receptionist, a young woman with a gentle demeanor and intelligent eyes, looked up from her desk. Good morning. Do you have an appointment? No, I said softly, but I'm hoping Mr. Lowe might see me. Her eyes widened slightly. The senior partners were men you requested without reason. Let me check, she said, disappearing through a heavy oak door. I stood still, listening to the muffled sounds of conversations behind the walls, legal battles, estate planning, contracts being reshaped to protect or to disinherit. It struck me then. Most people came here to guard what they feared losing. I had come to reclaim what I had quietly held all along. The receptionist returned. He'll see you now, Mrs. Vance. Mr. Thomas Lowe rose when I entered his office. He was in his early 60s, a composed man with a trim silver beard and eyes that missed very little. Eleanor, he said, extending his hand warmly, it's been a long time. Too long, I agreed as we sat. He studied me with a faint, knowing smile. What brings you in today? I hesitated only long enough to gather my breath. I'd like to make changes to my trust and to my will. His expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his gaze, an unspoken acknowledgement that such requests rarely came without a story. Very well, he said gently. What sort of changes are you considering? When does protecting someone become enabling them? When does love require a hard line? I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the soft wool of my sweater. I want to remove my daughter, Melissa, from any inheritance provision, completely. He didn't flinch. Lawyers hear worse, but he leaned forward slightly. Is this a sudden decision? No, I answered. It's a long overdue one. And who would replace her as the primary beneficiary? My grandson, I said quietly. Noah. He's the only one who visits because he wants to, not because he expects something. Mr. Lowe nodded thoughtfully. Noah Vance, I remember him, polite young man, curious. He still is, I murmured, and he sees me, not as an obligation, but as a person. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, his pen moving smoothly. And regarding the building, do you wish to keep the ownership structure the same? Yes, the trust retains ownership, but I want to add stipulations. I took a slow breath. After my passing, Noah becomes the successor trustee and sole beneficiary. Melissa is to have no access, no authority, and no claim. He wrote quickly now, the scratch of his pen steady and certain. I exhaled, surprised by the calmness in my chest. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't unsure. I wasn't even sad. It just felt right. Mr. Lowe looked up after a moment. Eleanor, these are firm decisions. Once signed, reversing them is not simple. I don't want to reverse them. He studied me for a long moment, then gave a single, respectful nod. Very well, I'll prepare the documents. We can sign everything later this afternoon, if that suits you. It does. He closed his notebook but didn't end the meeting. One more question, if I may. Yes? Is your daughter expecting access to your assets? I let out a slow breath. She expects control over them, over me by extension. His eyes softened with understanding. Then, he said, this is the correct step. We finalized the arrangements, and I left the office with a sensation I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. Weightlessness. As I walked home, the wind tugging gently at my sweater, I thought about how Melissa would react when she learned the truth. There would be shouting, tears, accusations. She'd say I was unwell, incapable, manipulated. But I wasn't cutting her off. I was simply setting her down. There's a difference. When I reached my apartment door, I saw Noah sitting on the floor beside it, his knees drawn up to his chest, his backpack slumped against the wall, his face so young, so open lit up when he saw me, erasing the worry etched there a moment before. Grandma, he said, scrambling to his feet, I was getting worried. You didn't answer your phone. I smiled, a real one that reached my eyes, and turned the key. Come inside, sweetheart. As he followed me in, I realized something, quietly and profoundly. He was the only one who ever knocked on my door without expecting anything in return, and that, more than any document or deed, was what deserved protection. Noah followed me in with that gentle caution young people sometimes use around the elderly, as if one wrong move might unbalance us. I didn't mind it. His care came from affection, not duty, a rare and precious thing. He set his backpack down by the sofa. Grandma, are you sure you're okay? Mom's been acting really strange since yesterday. She slammed a door so hard this morning it woke the neighbor's dog. I almost smiled. Melissa had always believed volume was a substitute for power. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said, hanging my coat with deliberate care. Sit with me a moment. We settled at the kitchen table. Without being told, he took the chair Samuel used to sit in. Some things you let happen simply because they feel right. He watched me carefully. He had his mother's sharp blue eyes, but none of her sharpness. She said you to argued. Your mother and I have had many conversations, I answered. Some are just louder than others. He huffed a small, understanding laugh, then grew serious. Did she say something hurtful? I looked at him, really looked, 20 years old, his shoulders still too narrow for the weight of the world, yet he carried more wisdom than his mother had at twice his age. She did, I admitted, but I'm not as fragile as she believes I am. He stared at the table's wood grain, running a fingertip along its lines. Grandma, I worry about how she talks to you. It's like she forgets you're a person. Sometimes I think she sees you as, he stopped himself, a burden. I finished for him, my voice gentle. You don't have to protect me from the truth, Noah. He swallowed, nodding slightly. I reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were warm and steady. You've always been kind to me, I said. That matters more than you'll ever know. He blinked hard, embarrassed by the sudden sheen in his eyes. I don't like seeing you pushed around. I'm not being pushed anymore. He looked up sharply. What do you mean? How do you explain to a pure heart that you've been wearing armor they never needed to see? I hesitated, not from doubt, but because truth should be offered carefully, especially to the only person who gives without expectation. There are things about my life your mother never cared to ask, I said gently, and things I kept quiet because peace felt easier than honesty. He waited, not pressing, just listening, another rare quality. I've spent the last day putting those things in order, I continued, and I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, you are not caught in the middle. Grandma, he said softly, squeezing my hand, I don't care about the middle, I care about you. Those words warmed something inside me that had been cold for a very long time. Then hear me when I say this, I replied, my voice firm but soft. I am not powerless, and I am not dependent. I've simply allowed people to believe I was. His brow furrowed. Grandma, what exactly are you saying? I smiled, a small, quiet thing, only that change is coming, and I've made choices that will protect me and protect you. His eyes widened slightly. Me? Yes. I released his hand and stood, moving to the window. Outside, the fading daylight drew long, elegant shadows across the courtyard. You've shown me more loyalty in your short life than most people manage in a lifetime, I said, my back to him. I won't forget that. I heard him rise slowly from his chair. Does Mom know about these choices? Not yet. And when she finds out? I exhaled, watching a neighbor below struggle with an overfull grocery bag. People always seem to be rushing, tripping over their own urgency. When she finds out, I said calmly, turning from the window to meet his gaze, she'll finally understand something she should have known a long time ago. What's that? I looked at him, seeing the same steady blue Samuel once had in his eyes. That I am not waiting for anyone to decide how my life should end. I paused, letting the words settle. I am deciding how it should continue. He looked at me with a mixture of admiration and something else, something like relief, as if he'd been afraid I would break, but now saw steel where he expected only glass. Grandma, he said quietly, his voice thick, I'm proud of you. The words settled over me like a warm, familiar shawl. For the first time in years, I felt not just seen, but respected, and I knew, with a deep certainty, that this was only the beginning. Noah left shortly after sunset, promising to come by the next day. The apartment felt quieter than usual when the door closed behind him, not empty, just steady, like a deep breath held at the top of the lungs. I washed our 2 teacups, dried them carefully, and placed them back on the shelf. Such small rituals, but they make a life feel lived, don't they? The ordinary acts of care that string the days together. I had just settled into my armchair, a soft blanket across my lap, when the doorbell rang, not a knock, a bell, firm, purposeful, and utterly foreign in this hallway. Melissa's way of announcing she was here to evaluate, not to visit. I opened the door to find Melissa standing there, a stranger beside her. The woman held a clipboard, wore a neat, unremarkable blazer, and offered a brittle, professional smile. Melissa folded her arms, a gesture of triumph. Mom, this is Miss Carter. She's with Adult Wellness Services. she'll be doing a quick assessment. Assessment. The word slithered into my hallway like an unwelcome draft. I stepped aside slowly. Melissa, what have you done? She breezed past me, the stranger in tow. Nothing dramatic. I just scheduled a standard evaluation to make sure you're still functioning safely on your own. You've been forgetful and difficult. You thought you'd have me certified and competent. I finished for her, my voice flat. Her eyes flashed. She hadn't expected me to name it so plainly. That's not what this is, she insisted, her voice tightening. This is for your own safety, Mom. Miss Carter clasped her hands politely. Mrs. Vance, if we could sit down for a moment, I'd like to ask you a few routine questions. No, I said. Both women froze. No, Melissa repeated, her voice pitching high with disbelief. Mom, you don't get to refuse. I do, I said calmly, remaining in the doorway. I am not obligated to participate in an evaluation I did not consent to, one requested under false pretenses by someone who is simply angry that I set a boundary. Miss Carter blinked, clearly thrown off. Assessors expect confusion, defensiveness rarely composure. Mrs. Vance, she tried again, gentler this time. This is only to ensure your well-being. I looked her directly in the eye. My well-being is for me to ensure, not my daughter, not the state. A long, heavy silence followed. Melissa looked from me to the social worker, disbelief cracking her polished expression. She's manipulating you, she hissed at Miss Carter. She's always been good at pretending she's fine when she isn't. Miss Carter held up a hand. Miss Vance, may I speak with your mother alone for a moment? Melissa looked offended but nodded tightly, stepping toward the window with a dramatic sigh. When did our safety become a negotiation? When did our own minds become territory to be claimed by others? The social worker approached me, her expression softening from professional to genuinely concerned. Mrs. Vance, I'm required to ask, do you feel unsafe in your home? Has anyone threatened you or pressured you? I almost smiled, but it was only with disappointment, only from one person, I said quietly, glancing past her toward my daughter. Understanding dawned in Miss Carter's eyes. She followed my gaze, then looked back at me. Are you in full control of your daily activities? She asked, her voice now barely above a whisper. Yes. Do you handle your own finances? Completely. Do you have support if you need it? I thought of Noah sitting outside my door, waiting without expectation. I do, I said. She exhaled a slow, relieved breath. Mrs. Vance, you're perfectly capable. I see no justification for involuntary oversight, nor for any further assessment. Melissa spun around. What, you just got here? With respect, Miss Carter said gently but firmly, turning to face her, your mother is lucid, oriented, and fully autonomous. I'm closing the case. That's impossible, Melissa snapped, her composure shredding. She forgets things all the time. She gets confused with documents. Your mother is perfectly competent, the social worker repeated, her tone final. Any difficulties she may have appear to arise from interpersonal stress, not from cognitive decline. I held Miss Carter's gaze. She understood. Melissa, for all her certainty, did not. The evaluator packed her clipboard, offered me a polite, almost apologetic nod, and left the apartment. The instant the door closed, Melissa erupted. How could you embarrass me like that? I walked slowly to my armchair and folded the blanket over its back. Melissa, you invited a stranger into my home without my consent because I'm not behaving as you'd like. That is not rational, it's coercive. You won't listen to me, you won't let me help, and now you're making a fool of. I'm protecting myself, I said, my voice quiet but absolute, something I should have done a very long time ago. She stared at me, chest heaving, a tangle of words caught behind her teeth. Mom, she said finally, her voice shaking with a tremor I couldn't quite identify. Why are you doing this? Because you've forgotten who I am, I answered, meeting her stormy gaze without flinching, and it's time you remembered. Her face went pale. She left without slamming the door this time. She simply closed it softly, like someone suddenly afraid of what might echo back. By the end of the week, the building itself felt restless. People moved through the hallways with that particular tension tenants get whenever management announces a change. Snippets of conversation drifted through half-open doors, complaints about fees, rumors about new investors, speculation about whether the rent would climb beyond reach. I listened quietly. People speak more freely when they believe no one important is listening. Late Friday afternoon, a printed notice appeared by the mailboxes. Mandatory tenant meeting, Saturday PM topic, rental adjustments and building policy updates. A small crowd gathered instantly, buzzing with irritation. Mr. Peterson shook his head, muttering to his neighbor, "They raise it every 6 months now. Whoever owns this place must think we print money in our closets." Behind him, a young nurse added, "They don't care if we have to choose between rent and groceries, as long as the check clears on time." No one noticed me standing a few feet away, folding the corner of the notice between my fingers. No one would have guessed the truth. Upstairs, I boiled water for tea and sat by the window, watching the courtyard fill with the early silhouettes of evening. Lights flickered on in other units. People settled in, unaware that the meeting tomorrow would reveal much more than they expected. The next day arrived cold and windless, the sky the color of old chalk. At precisely 6 o'clock, the meeting room on the ground floor filled with tenants, families with tired eyes, retirees on fixed incomes, young professionals clutching coffee cups, all carrying the same quiet dread. The building manager, David Clark, stood at the front with a stack of folders and a nervous smile. Melissa slipped in moments later, slightly breathless. She scanned the room, spotted me sitting in the back corner, and stiffened. She hadn't known I would attend. "Good." David cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, the building's ownership has recently approved new policy updates." "Ownership?" a voice from the crowd interrupted. "A young man with a baby in a carrier. Who is the owner? We've been asking for years." "That information is confidential," David said reflexively, smoothing his tie. A ripple of frustration passed through the room. Melissa raised her hand with a crisp, authoritative gesture. "Yes, could we finally get some clarity on the rent increases? This building isn't exactly luxury housing." Several tenants murmured agreement. Her voice carried. She enjoyed that. David shifted uncomfortably. "I assure you, decisions are made with the building's long-term improvements in mind." "And what improvements are those?" Melissa demanded, her tone sharp. "The elevators still break every month. The carpets are 20 years old. Where is our money going?" He glanced at me, just for a fraction of a second. Then I saw it, a small flicker of hesitation, a silent question. Should I reveal more? He didn't, not yet. Instead, he adjusted his glasses. "Rent adjustments follow guidance from the trust that owns the property." The word trust rippled through the room like a stone dropped in water. Melissa leaned forward. "So it's not a company, not a corporation?" "Correct," David said. "Then Horan's the trust," she pressed. "Again, that's confidential." "How much of our lives is shaped by the unseen hands of those we live alongside?" Her jaw clenched. I could almost feel the panic stirring beneath her irritation. She'd been losing ground with me every day, and now she was learning there were bigger forces in motion, all of them beyond her reach. The meeting dragged on, complaints, apologies, paperwork. Through it all, David addressed me with a courtesy that didn't go unnoticed. "Mrs. Vance," he said at one point, his voice respectfully soft, "if you have any concerns, please let me know personally." A few heads turned toward me, curious. Melissa's eyes narrowed to slits. Afterward, the crowd filtered into the hallway, grumbling. I rose slowly, smoothing my skirt, when Melissa cornered me. "Why did he talk to you like that?" she demanded in a hushed, furious whisper. "Since when do you two know each other?" "We've known each other for years," I said calmly. "That doesn't answer the question." "It answers the one you asked," I replied. Her teeth clicked together. "Mom, something is going on, and you're not telling me." "I will," I said softly, "when it's time." She stared at me, startled by the firmness in my voice. She had never heard me speak like someone who held a card she couldn't see. As she walked away, irritated and unsettled, David passed me on his way out. He gave a small, respectful nod. "Thank you for attending, Mrs. Vance." "Of course," I said. He hesitated, then lowered his voice so only I could hear. "Everything is prepared on our end, whenever you're ready." I nodded. "Thank you, David." Melissa, halfway down the hall, froze. She had heard him. She just didn't understand. Not yet. Melissa didn't sleep that night. I knew it before she even called the next morning. Her voice came through the phone tight and clipped, pulled thin by an anxiety she couldn't quite name. "Mom, I need to ask you something. It's important." I stirred my tea slowly. "Go ahead." "That man last night, Clark, the way he spoke to you." She paused, searching for the right accusation. Why did he say everything was prepared? Prepared for what? I didn't answer right away. In the silence, I could hear the tremor in her breathing. Melissa feared two things above all: losing control and looking foolish. Yesterday, she'd felt both. "Mom," she snapped when the silence stretched, "are you hiding something from me?" "I'm handling my affairs," I said calmly. "That's all." "What does that mean?" Her frustration spiked. "What affairs? Why didn't you tell me? I'm your daughter. I should know." There it was again, that unshakable belief that blood granted her a governing right over my life, a belief I'd fed by being silent for too long. "When something concerns you, I'll tell you," I said. "This doesn't concern you." "That's not your decision," she hissed. "It is," I replied, my voice even, "and it always has been." The line went quiet when she finally spoke again. Her voice quivered with something sharper than anger. "Fear. I don't understand what's happening." "You will," I said softly, "soon." Because the truth had been walking toward her for years, she'd simply avoided looking up. By mid-afternoon, I went downstairs to check the mail. A cluster of tenants still stood by the bulletin board, whispering. Word travels fast in old buildings, faster still when money is involved. "It's the trust," Mr. Peterson murmured to his neighbor. "That's why things are changing. New policies, new management." Another tenant, a woman who taught piano lessons, added bitterly, "Whoever runs it must be sitting on a fortune, probably some faceless family somewhere." A younger man near the back laughed without humor. "Whoever they are, they sure don't lose sleep over us." I slipped past them quietly, sorting through my envelopes. A medical statement, a bank notice, a letter from Noah's college about an upcoming concert. All the ordinary shapes of a life lived in steady rhythms. Behind me, I heard Mr. Peterson speak again. "Wish we knew who the owner was. You'd think they'd show their face once in a while." I almost smiled. If only they knew. How many of our neighbors hold stories we never think to ask about? Upstairs, the hallway was dim. The afternoon light stretched thin and tired across the worn carpet. I had just reached my door when footsteps approached fast from behind. "Mom." Melissa. She'd come straight from work, still in her tailored blazer, still tense around the mouth as if the day had been chewing on her. "Can we talk?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. She stepped past me into the apartment. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for clues like a detective at a scene. "Something's wrong. I can feel it. You're keeping secrets. You're meeting with people. You're different." Different, yes, but only because she'd grown used to a version of me that bowed. She turned back to me, her voice quieter now, more fragile. "Mom, do you owe money? Are you in trouble? Is that why Clark talks to you like that? Is this trust connected to you somehow?" She was close, painfully close to the truth. I walked to the kitchen counter and set down my keys. "Melissa, what I do with my life, my money, and my choices is private. It's always been private. You simply never asked." "I'm asking now," she said, a note of desperation sharpening her words. "Please." I looked at her then, not with anger, not with softness, but with a kind of clarity that had taken me decades to grow into. "You're asking," I said, "but not to understand me. You're asking to manage me." Her expression cracked. Her eyes swam with a sudden, startling panic. "No, Mom, I don't want to lose you. Ah, there it was. Not fear of my decline. Fear of losing access. I placed a gentle hand on the back of my kitchen chair. You won't lose me, Melissa, but you will lose the illusion that I'm dependent on you. She flinched as if I'd struck her. What does that mean? She whispered. It means, I said, holding her gaze, that the things you think you control, you don't. Her breath caught. She knew without knowing. She felt the truth circling her like a shadow she couldn't see yet. But soon, the light would shift. And she would. Melissa arrived 2 days later with a folder tucked under her arm. It was thick, bulging, the kind that carried forms meant to corner someone quietly. She didn't greet me. She simply walked inside, laid the folder on the table, and pressed her palm flat against it, as if steadying something restless inside her. Mom, she said, her voice controlled, I need you to sign a document. I didn't sit. What kind of document? It's just a residency assurance form. The words came too quickly. It gives me legal permission to advocate for you in case of emergencies. Emergencies, always that word, always with a shadow lurking behind it. Show me, I said. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. The language wasn't subtle, though she clearly hoped I wouldn't look too closely. Durable authority, rights of decision, property oversight, the type of paperwork that quietly rearranges a life without making a sound. Melissa, I said calmly, this is not a residency form, this is a control form. Her cheeks flushed. Mom, don't be dramatic. Everyone my age helps their parents with these things. Everyone your age, I answered, doesn't try to take legal authority from someone who still wakes up every morning, cooks her own meals, pays her own bills, and reads every line she signs. She stiffened, her knuckles white where she gripped the table. I'm trying to protect you. No, I said, meeting her stormy gaze, you're trying to secure yourself. Her eyes flashed fear, anger, disbelief, all braided together. Why would you think that of me? I'm your daughter. I'm the only one who shows up. I let that statement settle between us. It wasn't true, and she knew it. She knew Noah came by, called, cared. She simply didn't consider his presence valuable because he asked for nothing in return. I pulled out the chair and sat, looking at the paper again. Melissa, tell me honestly, what are you afraid of? She faltered, just for a second, but it was enough to reveal the truth beneath her indignation. I'm afraid, she whispered, the fight draining from her voice, that I won't have any say when things get worse for you, that someone else will make the decisions, that I'll be shut out. I lifted my eyes to hers. You're afraid of losing control. She swallowed hard. Yes. And why? I asked gently. Do you think you need control over my life? Because I'm your daughter, she repeated, louder this time, as if volume could turn her claim into fact. When does a role become a cage for both the one who holds it and the one it's meant to protect? Being my daughter gives you love, I said softly. It doesn't give you ownership. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The silence between us thickened, filled with everything we'd never said. She tapped the edge of the folder, her fingers trembling. Mom, if you don't sign this, I won't be able to help you. I folded my hands in my lap. Melissa, when have you helped me without resentment? Her breath hitched. The truth, spoken plainly, has a way of cracking the air between people. You're pushing me away, she whispered, her voice breaking. No, I said. I'm finally holding my own place. Her eyes flicked toward the paper again, desperate. Please, if you would just sign. No. The word was quiet. It did not waver. Melissa stared at me as if she didn't recognize the woman sitting across from her. Perhaps she didn't. She'd grown accustomed to a mother who bent in all the places she pressed. Now, I didn't bend. Fine, she said, her voice shaking. If you won't sign it, then when things fall apart, don't come to me. I won't be responsible. You haven't been, I answered gently, not for a very long time. Her face crumpled for the smallest moment, pain or fury. I couldn't tell. Then she straightened, gathering her folder, her movements sharp and trembling. This isn't over, she said, turning toward the door. It is, I replied, remaining seated. You just don't know it yet. She left without looking back. The door clicked shut. For a long moment, I stood in the quiet, feeling the tremor of what had just happened, not from fear, from release. Melissa believed she had lost a battle, but she didn't understand. I had never been fighting her. I had simply stopped surrendering. Melissa avoided me for 2 days. That alone told me more than any argument could. When she went silent, it meant she was grasping for control in places she shouldn't be reaching, and sure enough, signs of her panic began to show before the week even ended. The first hint came in the form of a voicemail, breathless, hurried, and unfinished. Mom, call me back. I need to ask you something. Actually, no, just call me. She hung up before finishing her own sentence. That, too, was unlike her. Melissa never left space for uncertainty. She filled silence the way others fill rooms with noise meant to drown out doubt. I didn't return the call. By afternoon, she showed up at my door, not bothering to hide the agitation twisting her features. Her makeup was slightly smudged, her hair pulled back too tightly. She'd been rushing, or crying, or both. Mom, she said, pushing past me without waiting, I need answers. I closed the door gently. About what? She paced the living room like a person searching for a fire she could swear she smelled but couldn't see. I went to the bank, she began, her voice strained. I asked to speak with someone about your accounts. They wouldn't tell me anything, not even whether you were overdrawn. That's because you're not authorized, I said simply. Her head snapped up. I am your daughter, and the bank deals with clients, I replied, not their daughters. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She took a shaky breath. So then, I went to the building manager. I asked him about the trust, about the rent increases, about who approves the policies. There it was, the path she should have left alone. And I asked. He refused to tell me anything, she said bitterly. He claimed confidentiality laws, confidentiality, as if I were some random tenant. But you are a tenant, I reminded her. Her face reddened. Mom, stop talking in riddles. I know something is going on. I know you know more than you're saying. I sat at the table and folded my hands. Melissa, what is it you fear you'll discover? She hesitated. This time, the pause wasn't dramatic, it was revealing. Finally, she spoke, the words dropping slowly, as though dragged out of her, that I'm being excluded, that I'm losing influence, that you're making decisions without me. I nodded. I am. She blinked, stunned by the lack of resistance. Why? Why would you do that? I'm your only child. Being my child, I said quietly, doesn't entitle you to ownership of my life. Her fingers curled into fists, nails digging into her palms. So the trust, it is connected to you, isn't it? Is that why Clark speaks to you with respect? Is that why he looked nervous when I questioned him? Her voice trembled now, thin with dread. She wasn't ready for the truth, but it was coming for her all the same. Her breathing quickened. Mom, do you own something? Do you have money, property, assets, things you never told me about? How much of a person's true worth remains unseen, tucked away in the quiet corners of a life? I let the silence stretch, not cruelly, but intentionally. Melissa had spent a lifetime talking over quiet truths. If she wanted this answer, she needed to sit with its weight. I have lived for many years, I finally said, and in those years, I have built things, protected things, preserved things. She stared at me, jaw slack. She wanted specifics, but she also feared them. Are you saying, she whispered, that you've been pretending to be struggling? No, I said, meeting her gaze. I've been pretending to be small enough for you to manage. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. You've made decisions, real ones, legal ones, without me? Yes. That's not fair, she said, her voice cracking like thin ice. I should have known. I deserve to know. I rose slowly, feeling every year of my age, yet none of its weakness. What you deserve, Melissa, I said softly, is honesty. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear widening her eyes. And the truth is, I continued, you have no authority over my life, not legally, not financially, Not anymore. She stumbled back a step. What? She breathed. What have you done? But it wasn't a question. It was a realization. And she was only beginning to understand how much she never knew. Melissa left my apartment that afternoon with a look I hadn't seen on her face since she was a child, something caught between fear and disbelief, the expression of someone who suddenly realizes the ground beneath them isn't solid. I didn't follow her to the door. I didn't speak another word. She needed the silence more than she needed answers. People often think truth is delivered in shouts, but sometimes it arrives like a quiet draft under a door, undeniable, cold, and impossible to ignore. The next 3 days told me exactly how shaken she was. She didn't visit, she didn't call, but the building whispered on her behalf. Tenants stopped me in the hallway, their faces puzzled with concern. Eleanor, your daughter was asking about emergency contacts. Should we be worried? She asked if I'd noticed you slipping, another said, then added kindly, I told her you seemed sharper than the rest of us. A third neighbor leaned in. She cornered David in the lobby for 20 minutes yesterday. Poor man looked ready to faint. By the fourth day, even the elevator seemed to sense the tension, creaking louder whenever Melissa stepped inside, as if protesting her impatience. She was digging hard, and she was much closer to the truth than she realized. By late afternoon, I heard her footsteps approaching my door, hurried, uneven. She didn't knock politely this time. She hammered her fist against the wood. Mom, open the door. I did. She stormed in like wind through an open window, scattered, breathless, visibly shaken. She didn't sit. She didn't greet me. She went straight to the center of the room and spun to face me. I found the trust. The room went still. I didn't feign surprise. There was no point. Her hands trembled as she held up a printout, blurred from being folded and unfolded too many times. I couldn't see all the details. She went on, her voice cracking, but I saw enough. It's registered under a private trustee. The address is this building, Mom, this building. She pressed the papers against her chest as if they were burning her. And Clark, he all but admitted the owner lives here. Her breathing hitched. It's you, isn't it? I didn't answer. Silence, I'd learned, can be a confession more powerful than words. Her face twisted, anger, fear, humiliation, all tangled together. How long? She demanded. How long have you been hiding this from me? Years, I answered softly. She staggered back a step as if the truth had physical weight. Years, she repeated, the word hollow. Years, while I worried about money, while I begged you to be reasonable, while I carried everything on my shoulders. You carried, I said gently, what you chose to carry, not what I asked of you. She shook her head wildly. No, this doesn't make sense. You lived like someone barely getting by. You never said a word, never hinted. Why? How many of us hide our strength to make others feel more comfortable? I met her gaze evenly, because peace was easier than disclosure, until it wasn't. Melissa covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling not with sorrow, but with something darker, a kind of betrayal only people who feel entitled ever experience. So, while I was panicking about the rent increase, she said slowly, you already knew everything. Yes, I said, and while everyone else is terrified of being priced out of their homes, I have plans in place that protect those who need protection. Her eyes widened. Plans without me? I held her gaze, especially without you. Her breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. Mom, you can't just cut me out. I haven't cut you out of my life, I said, only out of my decisions. She fell silent completely. Her shoulders shook once, then stilled. Finally, in a hoarse whisper, she said, what did you do? And I answered with the truth she had been circling all week. I took back what was mine, every piece of it. Melissa closed her eyes. She finally understood. Maybe not the full picture, not yet, but she understood enough to know. The story she'd told herself of a fragile mother waiting to be managed was ending, and the real story, the one she'd never imagined, was already unfolding beneath her feet. The morning Melissa learned the full truth began colder than any day that season. Frost clung to the edges of the courtyard grass like delicate lace. and the air outside my window was so still it felt as if the world were holding its breath. Fitting, I thought, some truths deserve a quiet stage. I had just finished my tea when my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. I answered. Mrs. Vance, this is David Clark. I wanted to inform you that your daughter is on her way to my office. She demanded a meeting regarding her lease terms. I assumed you might want to be aware. His voice carried that restrained tension of a man preparing for an unpleasant encounter. Thank you, David, I said. Let her speak. It's time. He exhaled, relieved to have permission. I hung up and sat still for a long moment, listening to the small hum of the refrigerator, the faint groans of the building settling around me. This place had sheltered so much of my life, my joys, my grief, my quiet survival, and now it would shelter the moment Melissa finally saw the truth she'd been scraping toward for weeks. Around noon, I made my way downstairs, not to intervene, just to be present. The door to the manager's office was slightly ajar, voices seeped through the crack, one strained with desperation, the other steady and measured. I'm her daughter, Melissa insisted, her voice tight. I have a right to know who owns this building. David's tone remained politely firm. I'm sorry, but ownership details are part of a protected trust. I cannot release that information. Don't play dumb, she snapped. You've been hiding something. She's been hiding something. I know it. I stepped into the doorway. Melissa didn't notice me at first. She was gripping the arms of the Tenant chair, leaning forward as if trying to force the truth out of the air itself. Miss Vance, David began carefully, your lease renewal will be sent next week if affordability is a concern. A concern? She barked a bitter laugh. My mother is losing her mind. My finances are a mess. And now you expect me to swallow another rent increase. Why won't anyone tell me who owns this damn place? David straightened in his chair, his eyes flicked toward me, just for a heartbeat. He took that slow, professional breath before revealing something delicate. Miss Vance, he said slowly, your landlord is not a company. Melissa frowned. So then who, a person? Yes. Her expression shifted, first confusion, then a dawning, horrible understanding. A person, she repeated. Someone in this building? Yes. Her breathing grew uneven. Who is it? David hesitated, not because he doubted, but because he understood the weight of what came next. Finally, he turned slightly, looking past her, toward me. Melissa followed his gaze. Her eyes widened, sharpened, then froze entirely. No, she whispered. No, that's impossible. I stepped fully into the doorway. Hello, Melissa. Have you ever witnessed the exact moment someone's perception of you shattered and reformed? She stared as if seeing me for the first time in her life, not her elderly mother, not the woman she'd spoken down to for years, not the fragile presence she'd tried to maneuver like a chess piece, but the owner, the trustee, the decision-maker, the person she'd been demanding to meet. You, she breathed, the word barely audible. You own this entire building? David spoke gently. Mrs. Vance has owned it for decades through a trust established long before most of our current tenants moved in. Melissa shook her head violently, as if trying to dislodge the truth. No, she can barely climb the stairs some days. She lives like she's struggling. She asked me for help. I said softly, because it mattered to you to be needed, not because I required it. She pressed a trembling hand over her mouth. And the increases, she said weakly, the policies, all approved by me, I confirmed. She stared at the floor, her shoulders folding inward. Why didn't you tell me? I approached her slowly, gently, because you never asked to understand me, Melissa, only to manage me. Her breath caught a small, pained sound. You said I was waiting to die, I continued, my voice soft as worn cloth, but I was waiting for the moment you would see me, not as something fragile, not as someone you could rearrange, but as myself. She lifted her head then, her eyes rimmed red. Mom, she whispered, I didn't know. No, I said, you didn't want to know. Silence settled between us, heavy, necessary. In that stillness, Melissa finally realized the power she believed she held was never hers. And the woman she believed was fading had never disappeared. She had simply stopped being small. Melissa didn't speak at first. She just stood there in David Clark's small office, staring at me as though the world had tilted beneath her feet. For years, she had moved around me as if I were a piece of fragile furniture, something to be dusted, shifted, eventually removed. Now she looked at me with the disorientation of someone realizing the furniture had a voice, and a deed, and a spine. "Mom," she whispered, her voice thinning at the edges, "how could you keep something like this from me?" I walked past her and rested my hand lightly on the back of the guest chair. My fingers no longer shook when I stood my ground. "Melissa, I didn't keep it from you. I simply lived my life without announcing its every detail." "But you let me believe you were," she swallowed, the word catching, struggling. "You let me believe you were barely getting by." "I never asked you for money," I said. "You came offering help, but it was always tied with strings. And when I tried to set boundaries," I continued, my voice calm and even, "you answered with fear, not love. Fear that I would make choices without you. Fear that you would lose control. And now that the truth is here, you're afraid again." Her eyes glistened, not from sorrow, but from recognition. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she said, her voice small. I thought you needed guidance." "You confused guidance," I replied softly, with ownership. David rose from behind his desk discreetly, nodding to me before slipping out and closing the door, leaving us alone. Melissa sank into the nearest chair, the printed trust papers trembling in her hands before she let them fall to the desk. "So," she asked, staring at her own fingers, "what happens now?" I sat across from her, lowering myself with the ease of someone who no longer carries invisible weight. "Now," I said, "you stop looking at me as though I'm nearing an ending. I'm still living, Melissa, still choosing, still capable." A tear finally escaped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. "I'd gotten so used to thinking of you as fading." How often do we mistake someone's quiet strength for weakness, simply because it doesn't make noise? I reached across the table, not to comfort her, but to steady the truth between us. "I am aging," I said, "not disappearing." She let out a long, unsteady breath, the fight gone out of her. "Will you forgive me?" "I already did," I answered, "long before today, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences." Her gaze lifted, searching my face. "Am I part of your plans at all?" "You are part of my life," I said gently, "but not of my decisions. Those belong to me." She nodded slowly, absorbing the truth she had avoided for years, and then, with a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from her, she said, "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said, "but you will have to meet me where I am now, standing, not bending." We walked out of the office together, quietly. The winter sun hit the hallway in a long, pale beam, cutting through the dust in the air. Melissa lingered there, caught between old habits and a life that suddenly felt different. I stepped into the light. For the first time in decades, it felt like it belonged to me. As I walked toward the elevator, my dignity settled around me like a shawl I had finally remembered how to wear. I had not waited to die. I had waited to live again, on my own terms, and I had succeeded. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside, and Melissa, after a moment's hesitation, followed. We rode up in silence, but it was a different kind of quiet now, not empty, not charged, just full. When we reached my floor, she walked me to my door. She didn't try to come in. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I'd like that," I replied. She turned to leave, then paused. "Mom?" "Yes?" "I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was a beginning, and for now, that was enough. The days that followed were not suddenly easy. Some truths, once spoken, leave a quiet echo that takes time to settle, but the air in my apartment felt clearer, lighter, as if a window had been opened after being sealed shut for years. A week after our meeting in the office, I received a formal letter from David Clark, outlining the new rent stabilization program I had approved for long-term tenants. No one knew it came from me, they only knew their fears had been heard. That was enough. Noah came by that evening, bringing a box of my favorite ginger tea. He didn't ask about his mother, he simply sat with me, telling me about his classes, his friends, the world as he saw it, full of possibility, not burden. As we sat at the kitchen table, I thought about the distance between a secret kept and a truth shared. The space between them is where we either grow or shrink. For so long, I had chosen to shrink, thinking it was the kind thing to do, but kindness without honesty is just a slower form of fading. What parts of yourself have you tucked away to keep the peace, and what might happen if you gently took them back? Grandma, Noah said, pulling me from my thoughts, you seem different, in a good way. I feel different, I admitted. I feel like myself again. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that reminded me so much of Samuel. I'm glad. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, my phone lit up with a text. It was from Melissa. Mom, I'd like to come by Saturday, not to talk about anything in particular, just to talk, if that's okay. I read it twice, then I typed my reply. I'll put the kettle on. It wasn't a fix, it was a thread thin, but strong enough to hold onto. The strongest foundations are often laid in silence, brick by patient brick. I slept deeply that night, without the old, familiar ache of swallowed words. The following Saturday, Melissa arrived at 2 o'clock. She didn't bring a folder. She brought a small pot of hyacinths, their purple blooms promising spring. We sat in the living room. The silence was awkward at first, but it was a new kind of awkward one that acknowledged the shift between us. She didn't apologize again. She didn't try to manage. She simply asked, "How are you, Mom, really?" And for the first time in a very long time, I told her, not everything, but enough. We talked about Samuel, about the early days in this building, about the dreams we had that didn't come true, and the ones that did, quietly, without fanfare. She listened. She really listened. A life lived with quiet intention is not a small life, it is a deep one. When she left, the hyacinths remained on the windowsill, their scent filling the room with the promise of something new growing from old soil. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or quietly strong, then you understand that our later years are not an ending, they are a reclaiming. This is the mission of Grandma's last letter, to share stories of strength, wisdom, and the quiet dignity of lives fully lived. If you found meaning in Eleanor's journey, please let us know. Like this video, subscribe to Grandma's last letter for more stories that honor the depth and resilience of the human spirit. Your support helps us bring these important narratives to light. And in the comments below, I'd love to hear from you. What's one piece of quiet strength you've witnessed or carried in your own life? Let's create a space of shared wisdom and respect. Because every person has a story, and every story deserves to be heard not as an echo, but as a clear, steady voice. Thank you for listening.